you want to respond, Mr. Shadan Farasat? The government's view is, look, the Supreme Court has cleared the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has been cleared of any... Then a documentary comes which suggests that maybe there was involvement of the government. There's a huge question mark over that 27th February meeting where allegedly the government said that the police should not interfere when rioters are on the street. There is no evidence that such a meeting took place. That evidence has been dismissed in a court of law by an SIT. Why should the government of India therefore not respond strongly is the argument that Mr. Modi's supporters make.
See, I have had an opportunity to look at a documentary. I have seen the first part. I think one can have two views on whether you agree with it or not, but I personally didn't find anything which, you need to ban as such. And, the issue of Mr. Modi's role has been in the Indian politics for 20 years. So surely I'm a little actually surprised, even from a perspective of self-interest, why would a government do that? Because it only attracts more eyeballs to the issue. The more you ban, the more people are inquisitive, oh, what does it have, right? So that's number one. But I want to make a larger point about this. I think the challenge today, the government has used the emergency powers under the IT rules of 2021. I think it's very important to understand that government should never have the power to regulate or censor something. Be it the Press Council of India in the context of the textual press, or be it the censor board in the context of cinematographic.
But that's wishful thinking, Shadan, from the time of Indira Gandhi, and we can even go back earlier to Nehru. From time to time, governments do not like to be put under the have resorted to censorship. It's not something that started in 2014. You have state governments like Mamata Banerjee's who arrest a professor for a Facebook post.
I take your point fully, Rajdeep. I am in agreement with you that this is not just, specific to a political party. It's happened across the board. It happens even today. The point I'm making is this. I think it's important that there are independent, genuinely independent regulators for these kind of things. You can't leave these powers with the government, because what happens then is obviously the kind of bans we are seeing now. And just give one example. BBC has done this documentary. Possibly it does not even suit Rishi Sunak today. I mean, obviously we are, Britain and India are in a negotiation over FTA. I'm sure Rishi Sunak, it's not in his interest to have this documentary come out. But because BBC is an independent broadcaster, right? It is capable of doing it. That's independence for you. So what we need is here independent regulations so that these kind of bans can't be done by the government. You need something genuinely independent. I take your point. Right. This has happened in the past. It happens. It's not limited to one political party. And I think it should be cured across the board. Okay, I think we should take the larger, as opposed to just going to 2002 rule, etc., which we've had for last 20 years. I want to make a larger point as to direct government regulation of free speech. That should not happen.
You made that point. You're saying that governments cannot censor. This should be left to an independent regulator.
Genuinely independent regulator.
Shashi Shekhar Vempati, you want to respond? You've also written suggesting that it is the right step that has been taken. You cannot allow documentaries like this to, in your view, tarnish the image of the country unfairly.
Absolutely. I think, first of all, let me point out that it's a mischaracterization to call it a ban or censorship. This documentary was not aired in India. It was aired only in Britain. It has been made available through iPlayer only for citizens and people who are licensee holders who pay the television license fee in the UK. Whatever content you're seeing on YouTube or Twitter is pirated content. It is copyright protected. So to call it a ban or a censorship is fundamentally wrong.
Shashi Shekhar Vempati, with due regard, the government has invoked emergency powers to get YouTube and Twitter to drop it. So, we are being disingenuous to suggest it's not censorship. It's a form of censorship.
Secondly, to your larger question on, should this kind of content be allowed or, is it right? I think the documentary has several holes in it. It is not an honest exercise. It is not a thorough exercise. It has cast aspersions on the highest court of India. And I think that is a very strong reason why the government has, invoked these emergency powers, because you cannot have content of this nature jeopardize the relations between India and UK. And to also respond to your previous speaker's argument that, the BBC is independent, I think there's quite a bit of body of evidence there in the public domain on how the BBC collaborates with agencies of the state of the UK to put forth their state agenda. So I don't buy this argument that, BBC is some kind of an independent entity here.
Okay.
Also, we must not lose sight of what is happening in the UK, where the BBC is under tremendous pressure over its funding. So it has, started to look at a future which is beyond broadcasting.
So you see the BBC working to some malicious agenda. Whose agenda? Before I move on, whose agenda? Do you have any, are you saying that the BBC is working to someone's particular agenda? Why would the British government agenda be the BBC's agenda on this? Whose agenda?
Well, there are several questions that have been raised in recent months on the alleged political bias, the editorial bias within the BBC. So clearly the BBC is within the crosshairs of the domestic politics in UK. So I wouldn't attribute to any one particular side there, but it's quite evident that whatever the BBC is doing is the outcome of the internal political turmoil in the UK, and that's what is manifesting here. And it's very unfortunate that they've tried to make India the subject of this domestic debate that's going on there.